One of the interesting benefits of the prolonged lockdowns I experienced during 2020 was I've been working more efficiently. Prior to COVID-19, I worked from home 1 or 2 days a week and from the office the other days. But working from home full-time interestingly made me much more efficient in my use of time. So how do you make the most use of your time? How do you make sure you're working most efficiently? That's the topic of the discussion today in my monthly Build a Business, Not a Job podcast with Mark Creedon. But even if you're not in business, and even if you're not a professional, this podcast is going to be valuable because for most of us, it seems there's never enough time in the day, is there? However, we've all got the same 24 hours to accomplish a task, and some people seem to be exceptionally good at it, while others seem to struggle meeting their deadlines. So my question is, why are some people so much more efficient at using their time than others? And the answer lies in time management. So today I'm going to share with you how successful people manage their time so that you're going to make the most use of the 1440 minutes you are given every day. Welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Today, we're going to have a chat about the 15 habits of successful business people, entrepreneurs and investors. They may not all be relevant to you. You may not use all of them, but if you get to use 2 or 3 of them, it's going to get you to make a lot more out of your day and you're going to be much more productive. So let's have a chat with my business partner and founder of Business Accelerator Mastermind, Mark Creedon, about how successful people manage their time. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Michael.
Now, Mark, we all have the same amount of time, but some of us squander it, waste it, don't use it efficiently. So what I'd like to talk with you about in this podcast today is how we can make the most of our time. We're into a new year. We've got a whole lot of new goals. We're probably going to want to forget what happened last year. So let's see what we can do to help people get the most out of the time. And this inspiration came from a blog that I read a short while ago. So I'd like to read you out what some of the thoughts were and get your take on it, since I think it's probably one of the most common requests you get as a business coach. How do I make the most use of my time?
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the greatest questions that we get.
Well, the number one tip was time is your most valuable and scarcest resource. We've all got the same 1,440 minutes every day, don't we?
Yeah, we do, Michael. It's interesting that people talk about time management and how do I make more time, and of course we actually can't make more time. But what successful people do is they understand what you've just said, and that is they understand that we have 1,440 minutes in a day, and so they actually think in terms of minutes as opposed to days or weeks.
That's interesting. And what does that mean?
Well, it means that they get to understand the true value of their time. So they're talking about, time management isn't about managing time because we've all got the same a number of minutes in the day. It's actually about managing priorities. So they understand the value of time. They know that, Michael, time is it's the one commodity you can't get back. Like, you can lose money and you can make it back. You can get ill and you can recover. But when time is gone, it's gone forever, Michael.
So by thinking about it in minutes rather than days, you actually value each precious minute and you don't waste those minutes. You use them effectively. So I guess the number one tip is capitalize on the time you've got and you're going to get a whole lot more done. I think the next tip would be understand what your most important task is in the day and do it first.
Yeah, it is a matter of working on the right things. I mean, what you have to think about in terms of, and this applies, Michael, not just to business, of course, this applies to life and, your organization in your personal life as well. So ask yourself the question, what's that one project that's going to give you the highest return? What's that one project that's going to double your business or going to give you so much more time back? And then make that your most important task and lock it in. Schedule time to work on that task first, Michael.
So it's important to know what your most important task is. And as you say, schedule it. Now, I know I work most efficiently in the morning, and I think a lot of people do. On that basis, then, I have time set aside to do that, a 2-hour window first thing in the morning, while most people work on other people's most important tasks first. They answer emails. They look at what other people are wanting of them rather than working on their own most important task.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Michael, your email inbox is really just somebody else's to-do list. So rather than spending time working on their priorities, work out what your most important tasks are. What are the things that are going to give you the most return? Double your business, give you extra time, make your life better, spend more quality time with your family, whatever it might be, make that your most important task. Lock that into your calendar, get it out of the way when you're at your cognitive best first thing in the morning, and make that happen before you start dealing with other people's to-do lists.
Another tip was work from your calendar, not a to-do list. Now, I know I've tried a whole lot of ways of doing to-do lists, written lists, and I've enjoyed crossing out things at the end of the day, scrolling up the paper and throwing it away. I've tried electronic to-do lists, and recently I've actually swapped to the program Trello, which I'm finding very useful. But the concept here was that you don't get most of the things on your to-do list done. You never do you?
No, you don't. But let me ask you this. Have you ever written something on your to-do list that you've already done just so you can have the pleasure of crossing it off?
No, I've never cheated myself that way. But what I have found, Mark, is by putting a time aside in my calendar rather than a to-do list, I've actually done the task then.
Yeah. Michael, one of the things that I always teach our clients is the concept that I call cash flow follows your calendar. So how you make the most money in your business is by doing the most important things. That's what we just spoke about. So what you do is you take your to-do list and you drop that to-do list straight into your calendar. And there's two advantages of that. One, it absolutely then gets done. So you pick a day, you pick a time, you pick a duration for it. It definitely gets done. But the other thing is you actually remove it from your headspace. So you no longer think about, I must do this, I must get to it. Instead, do you know what? That's locked in. 2:00 Thursday, I'm going to make that phone call, or I'm going to have that meeting, or I'm going to complete that task.
I think one of the things that gave me a sense of comfort many years ago was when I realized there's always going to be more to do. I know when I first started off, working 5 days a week wasn't enough, so I worked 7 days a week. I worked longer hours, but it never got all the tasks done, Mark.
No. And Michael, we often see that too at certain times of the year, don't we? Where people feel that suddenly there's times like Christmas or end of financial year, or we suddenly think that, around Christmas time, I find that people are suddenly trying to get all of these things done on their list. And I had somebody the other day say to me that they wanted to get something done that had been sitting on their list for 6 months, and suddenly it had to be done in 2 weeks. I mean, if it hasn't been a priority for the last 6 months, it probably isn't a priority in the next 2 weeks either. So there's always more to do. If you work out what's highest and best use of your time, what's your priority, and then lock that into your calendar, you'll get through so much more. You'd probably be surprised how much time you'll gain back, actually.
One of the tips from successful people about how to manage their time, and that's what we talk about today, is a tip from Richard Branson, who said, always carry a notebook. He thought that was one of the most valuable time management tips he had. I know my wife Pam carries a notebook, so rather than doing things electronically, she writes it down. And I know you enjoy journaling, Mark.
Michael, I do. I set aside time every morning to journal, and it's a really important part of my practice. And that for me just gives me clarity of thought. It gives me the opportunity to be grateful for things, and just the opportunity to stop and take stock for a moment. So journaling is really important. Interestingly, the most successful people I've ever known either journal or carry a notebook. And Michael, I know that you love technology, and I know you love, you're a bit like me in some ways, but you love gadgets and technology and new programs. But I know even when I'm talking to you, you pick pen and paper up, and whilst you might not always carry a notebook, you always carry notes with you, and you're always just writing little bits and pieces down. And the most successful people I know in business and in life, that's exactly what they do, Michael.
I've realised that it gets it out of my head because otherwise it's still sitting there and doesn't leave room for other new ideas. Mark, another time management tip is best use of your inbox. Many of us use our inbox or text messages. I think it's a form of relief. You get those dings. Isn't it the same as you get in the slot machines or at the casino? You actually feel good. Hey, somebody's wanting me or wanting to speak to me, or there's something for me to do.
Yeah. Oh, Michael, I'm a terrible gambler. I probably play the slot machines, once a year, if that. I'm afraid the casinos will never make a lot of money out of me. But you're right. There's this little fix, and part of it comes down to that sort of that need to be wanted. There's real value in shutting off those notifications. So, for example, Michael, on my phone, the only notifications I have are text messages, and that way I control my email, not let my email control me. And it's a really important distinction to make, I think.
I know the other thing we both do is have specific times, 2-3 times a day we read our emails. It's too easy to just instantly respond to emails when they come in. And that's that old story of men aren't very good at multitasking, but let's be blunt, none of us really are anyway, because it takes time to get back into your train of thought. So the next tip, as we said, is control your inbox. What about meetings and attending meetings? Zoom and 2020 has taught us some different things about that. How would you handle that with your clients at Business Accelerator Mastermind? What advice would you be giving them?
Well, there's two things. One is to schedule a meeting as a last resort. And the second thing would be to set a really clear time frame for the meeting. I mean, one of the things that I see in meetings is people go into a meeting with no understanding of what they want to get out of it, and no agenda for how it's going to process. And then the third thing is no time frame for it. I read an article recently where a company in the Netherlands moved their meetings initially from sitting around a boardroom table to stand up. And I know that's something that you do. So stand-up meetings, they're much quicker. And then they moved to planking meetings. Oh. And so they actually went from 35-minute meetings to about 2-minute meetings because nobody could plank beyond 2 minutes. So you've got to set an agenda. You've got to set a time frame for it. You've got to know what the outcome is. But the other thing is, there's no sense in having a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. So, meetings as a last resort, and see if you can get people to work on solving their own problems without having to put all of their heads together in a physical meeting.
Now, it may not be possible for some people listening to this to do it because you're not the boss, you're not one setting the agenda, but see if you can organise meetings at a time that's suitable for you. In other words, if your most productive time of the day is the morning, like I said a moment ago, say no to meetings in the morning. Use it for the most important tasks of the day, like we said a moment ago, and then do your meetings at other times of the day. The other thing is you've got to learn not just to say no to meetings, Mark. You should probably be saying no to more things, because every time you put something on your list, you're actually saying no to something else. So how do you decide what's important, what isn't, and what you should be saying no to?
I think, Michael, you need to understand, we spoke before about what's your most important task. I think you also need to understand what your goals are. And so as requests come through to you, you ask yourself this question: is doing this thing, attending this meeting, having this conversation actually going to feed my goals? Is it going to further the direction that I'm traveling in? If the answer is no, then you should find a way to say no to it. Now, as you just said, if you're an employee, sometimes that can be difficult. But do you know what? My experience, Michael, is that generally speaking, as business owners, we actually appreciate that sort of input. And if you can make an input to the boss that says, hey, listen, this meeting we have, I actually think we could do that quicker, shorter, focus on a different way of doing it, and that will increase productivity and time and job satisfaction. I would think the business owner would probably appreciate that. So understanding what your immediate goals are and say no to the things that don't work with that.
I think some of us just don't want to come across as being rude. We want to help other people when they ask us for help. But if you think about it, if you say yes to one thing, you're actually saying no to another thing, or sometimes to many things. So be careful about what you accept. And that leads us into something that I know you spend a lot of time teaching at Business Accelerator Mastermind, the power of the Pareto Principle, that old 80-20 rule that 80% of your results come from about 20% of your activities.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Michael, because it doesn't matter. I mean, I forget. I know Pareto was a mathematician. I forget, when it was in the 1600s or something. But it's just never changed, has it? And it applies to so many things in life, in business, in personal life. 80% of your results will come from about 20% of your activities. So it is a matter of just taking some time, slow down, look at the work that you're doing, pull out the handful of tasks that are actually going to give you the most results, and focus on those. And there's a real theme here, Michael. We're talking about most important task. We're talking about saying no to things that don't fit in with your goals. And that fits very much into that 80-20 Pareto principle.
Well, I know at Business Accelerator Mastermind, you go into it even more deeply because you break the 80-20 rule down to the 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities, and then you break those 20% activities down again and again. So you've got some great models that you take people through. And when they realize that and they learn that they've got to focus on their strengths and their passions, and they learn to delegate, that gives them a lot more time. But people find it hard to delegate, Mark.
Yeah, they do. There's a whole bunch of things that stop people from delegating, but probably the two most common ones are fear of letting go and just this omnipotency myth that people go, well, nobody can do it as well as I can. So, Michael, in Business Accelerator Mastermind, we do actually go through a process of teaching people to delegate, going through the principles of delegation. And if you can learn the delegation skills, what it will do is it will remove all of those 80% tasks, those tasks that aren't your most important, the tasks that don't fit in with your goal. It'll get them off your plate, and it will enable you to have that extra freedom. You'd be surprised once we actually teach people delegation skills, freeing up a day a week is not an uncommon outcome for them.
And they don't always take that day off to play golf or spend it with their family, but what they've done is actually spend it on their A activities. So I know you go into A, B, C, and D activities, and that's really important to understand because your A activity earns you so much more per hour than the D activities, which are the ones that you really should be delegating. Now, a couple of times we've mentioned Business Accelerator Mastermind. I guess we've got to be open and transparent, and you and I are business partners in that. Many years ago, I've lost track now. It's over a decade. You've been my business coach. You then became business coach to the other directors at Metropole before you were now a director at Metropole. And then I started referring clients to you, and I saw the great results they got. I saw how you changed my life and my business and actually helped me build a business rather than just have a job. And I saw how you did that with other people as well. And on that basis, what happened was I thought, hey, this is too good. It's so useful for my clients. I wanted to be part of it. So we set up Business Accelerator Mastermind. That's how I got involved. How did you get started doing this sort of thing?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, Michael. I got involved. In some ways, you got involved the easy way, I guess. In this, I got involved the hard way. So for me, I've always been an entrepreneur. I was just saying to somebody the other day, I think I had my very first business was selling peanuts in a street stand out the front of my parents' house when I was 7 years old. So I've always been an entrepreneur. But the problem was, Michael, I never had a mentor who taught me anything other than that you could only achieve success through extraordinary hard work. So it was only ever work harder, not smarter. And so what I did was I went to uni. I had a number of jobs. I had my own business. By the time I was in my mid-30s, I'd burnt out. And in fact, I'd burnt out to the point where, I'd lost my marriage, I had a poor relationship with my children. And frankly, taking my own life was a very real option for me. So I realized there had to be a better way. And that's what I then spent the next number of years and a lot of money learning new ways, finding a different way to succeed in business without burning yourself out. And that's kind of what got me into coaching. And then I discovered the value not just in individual accountability, but in shared wisdom and collective momentum, which is what comes from a group coaching program. And that's how Business Accelerator Mastermind was born, Michael.
Well, it's been very successful, and I know you've been a business coach to some very large entrepreneurs, some very big business people, and not just me and the team at Metropole, but others in various industries. And I think that's where it was very valuable. You're bringing information out from other industries and helping your clients with that, but also for solopreneurs and also for professionals. So if you want to understand more about Business Accelerator Mastermind and how you could, now that we're in a new year, have the same business coach on your side that I and the other directors of Metropole have, go to metropolemastermind.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, metropolemastermind.com.au, and find out a bit more about what Mark does and how he could help you. Now, back to these time management tips that successful people have used, Mark. What's your thoughts about batching your work and setting aside parts of a day or whole days to do things?
I love it. The thing about, Michael, for me, when I find that my productivity is on the downward spiral, if you like, invariably it's because I've stopped batching. And I think you find the same thing. And in fact, I was having a conversation with one of our mastermind members yesterday, and he was sort of starting to get into overwhelm and panic mode. And when we dug deeper into it, because that's one of the things that we do, we have the opportunity to unstick them. We found that he'd stopped batching. So he'd stopped setting aside time for the day. And, it's come out of, I know Dan Sullivan talks about it, Tim Ferriss talks about it in the 4-Hour Workweek. If you can have focus days, buffer days, free days, if you can batch your emails, batch your phone calls, batch the work that you're doing, what it means is that you've got dedicated time set aside for it. You can dive deep into it, but then you also have times when you're not working, when you've got some free time, when you've got time to work in your genius, something that we very much focus on in Business Accelerator Mastermind.
Now, you've mentioned free time twice just a second ago, and I think that's also important. You've got to give yourself that time to rest, to recharge, to keep moving, because the pressures of life create, I know some entrepreneurs, certain personality styles don't like taking that time, but it does make a big difference.
Michael, it makes a big difference to you, but it also makes a big difference to the people around you. And I don't just mean in business. So there's nothing worse than working for somebody who's completely frazzled and overwhelmed, because it just feeds down not just to the people around you, but ultimately it feeds down to your clients as well. And it starts to come out in the service that you deliver. But what's the sense in doing all of this? What's the sense in working hard and being successful either in our job or in a business or in a position of a management within a business, if we then have a really ordinary life at home? And that's what I did. I didn't batch and burnt myself out and burnt a marriage. And I'm very grateful that I've got a great relationship with my kids and grandkids now, but I had to work hard at that once I realized what was important.
So with this concept of batching, when I first learned about it, I set aside initially half a day a week as a focus day, just to get onto the most important tasks and let the business do other things, because I was still very involved in the business. And as the business grew, I set aside more times on focus days. And then there were buffer days when the day-to-day things had to be done. And then there were also free days set aside. So, Mark, I've got in my calendar a couple of afternoons a week, which can't be changed, can't be taken away. They're the times I spend with my kids and my grandkids, and they're the most valuable times of the day. So that's very useful. Another trick that I've learned along the way is if you can do something quickly, rather than handle it again, whether this is an email or a little task, just get it done, get it over and done with, and move on.
Yeah, it's called the one touch or the touch at once principle. And Michael, when you're not working in this principle, and I'm sure you've done, I know I have, how many times do you pick something up on your desk and you move it from one pile to the other, one side to the other, or you take something out of an email inbox and you put it into a folder and just do it. Just pick it up and do it. So if there are things that can be done quickly, and just a little adjunct to that too, is that once you learn to delegate, the same principles apply. So touching it once might be doing it, but might also be delegating it. So it's, do it, delegate it, or delete it, get rid of it, make a decision, work on it, and just watch how getting those things off your desk, out of your inbox, out of your head is actually going to give you more time, more energy, and more ability to focus on the really important things.
Now, we've mentioned delegation a few times, and only before we started pressing the record button here, we talked about somebody who delegated but didn't delegate properly and the task wasn't done correctly. So what tips would you give to somebody when you say, well, don't do it yourself, delegate it? That's not the highest and best use of your time.
Sure. So there's four basic things, I think, which are the rules of delegation. The first is that when you delegate something, you have to understand that what you're delegating is not the task, but the responsibility for it. So when you delegate something to somebody, you're actually now handing over responsibility for it. What that means is if they've got questions on it, if they're unsure what to do next, you actually have to let them find the answers. And so not micromanaging, because if you're going to micromanage it, you might as well not delegate in the first place. So that's the first thing, understand its responsibility. Second thing is make sure that who you're delegating it to has all of the skills, tools, and resources they need. Third thing is to make sure that there's the expectations are crystal clear. And then finally, and this is the one thing that most people miss, Michael, is that there is a time-based reporting process in place. So if you delegate something, you delegate the responsibility for it, you make sure they've got the tools, you make sure the expectations are clear, and that there's a time frame by which you want to report back on it.
To finalise this list of time management tips, tricks that successful people use, let's talk about something that's not really related to time, but about us. So if we want to be most productive, we've really got to look after ourselves, our bodies, our energy, our focus, Mark.
Yeah, we do. You know, the thing about business and life is that it shouldn't be a marathon, and very few of us, very, very few of us are marathon runners. So I always like to work in sprints. And, you know, Michael, in Business Accelerator Mastermind, we actually work in 6-week sprints. So everything that we do for our clients while they're in the program works across a 6-week time frame, because we know that 6 weeks is enough time to get things done, but not enough time to get sort of burnt out in the process. So you've got to look after yourself. You've got to take more breaks. You've got to get sleep. And the idea is just to set sprints, run hard, and then stop and take a rest. Then set another sprint, as opposed to thinking that it's a constant marathon, because that's where burnout becomes a significant factor.
Sure. So look after yourself, look after your body, have a break, look after people around you, the people that you're doing all this for also. So there you have it. We've all got the same amount of time, 1,440 minutes a day. Don't squander it. Don't waste it. You start using it efficiently. And if you want to get some help, if you want to build your business to a real business rather than a job, why not go to metropolemastermind.com.au, find out about how Mark Creedon could help you, just like he's helped me and so many other successful business people and entrepreneurs. Thanks for your time today, Mark.
It's always a pleasure, Michael.
Well, now that you know how to use your time more efficiently, I've got something for you to do with this extra time. Throughout the month of January, rather than the 2 episodes a week, we're going to bring 3 shows of the Michael Yardney podcast to you. A new one, plus a replay of some of the best episodes we've had in the past. You see, I found in January, lots of us have got a bit of extra time, and while you may have gone to some of the back episodes of the show, there's lots of gold there, so I'm going to be bringing you 3 shows a week. Hopefully you're going to be able to appreciate and enjoy it. And if you do get some benefit, whether it's from this show that you just listened to today or from other episodes, please share it. There's a share button on every podcast app, or tell somebody about the Michael Yardney podcast, or tell the world by leaving a review on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to the show. Of course, in between the shows, you can keep in contact with me on social media. Just look for Michael Yardney. And if you want to get my inner thoughts, if you'd like to keep up to date with what's going on, why not go to the Facebook page that we've put specifically for our community? Just look for the Property Update Facebook page, and I'd love to share my thoughts with you personally. Have a great week, make it a great week, and I'll be back more frequently over the next little while.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropol, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favorite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropol to help you?